Hi, my name is Barry Threw. I'm the executive and artistic director of Gray Area. We are a 17-year-old now, sort of countercultural institution here in San Francisco. We deal with art, technology, science, and humanities, and so we do interdisciplinary collaboration. We have a space down on Mission Street between 22nd and 23rd. That is a large event venue where we do exhibitions and audiovisual performances, conferences and symposia. We also have education programs where we teach technical skills through the production of creative work, and also have programs on sort of media literacy and theory and how artists can integrate technology into their practices. We have research programs and an incubator program, and all of this goes to create a sort of integrated kind of suite of programming where we can have artists sort of reflect on the impacts of technology on society, and also generate new forms of creative expression from working with current tools.
Hi everyone, my name is Cyborg. I've been using this name for like over a decade. I always wanted to be a cyborg. This is my end goal. So as my name suggests, I'm a multimedia transhumanist artist. I experiment on fusion technology with art, because art to me is not just aesthetic expression, also a transformative force that enables us to push human boundary and also kind of reshape human potential. So I do a lot of interactive and immersive art installations, and I curate experiences that kind of invite viewers to co-create with me through technologies like brain computer interface devices and also quantum computing. So I aim to like kind of open an experience center in SF as the first stop. And so like the ultimate goal is actually to help us as human beings to engage with technology and also kind of to enjoy the possibilities of a post-AGI world, post-abundance world.
I think, okay, I think, let's start from. So let me start with some easy question, like basic question. How's it like to be an artist? Like, even in San Francisco, right? It's the city of technology, AI. Like, as an artist, like, how are you navigating?
So I actually came to SF when I decided I wanted to be an artist. I was in the technology world for the past like 8 years, and I lived in Singapore, Shanghai, London, Toronto, New York, LA before I moved here. I moved here actually purposefully. I want to do art here because I think it's a city full of like wonderful technologies, but we kind of want to revive the art and cultural before COVID. And this is the best place to create because like we are so enabled with all the tools like technologies as all the wonderful speakers that talking to us like today. I use a lot of the things that Luma, I use like Comfy UI and like a runway. So, and I also got like kind of early access to a lot of the tools. I got to meet like founders who are not in the art field. They are a founder of like a BCI company or like a robotics, but I'm able to kind of work with them to create wonderful art. Because ultimately, I believe in the post abundance world, everyone could be a creator. Now, this is like a free creator world. We will be happy to create experiences for people, and it's like kind of a new currency and new social asset.
Well, I'm not an artist, so I can't speak to that, but we do have an organization that supports very many. And I can say that San Francisco, it's always been an exciting place to be an artist, and particularly for folks that are at this intersection of technology. I mean, what other, here or Shenzhen are pretty much the two places you could be to be on like the actual cutting edge of what is happening on technology and engage with that, which is extremely important. I mean, you were talking about art as a transformative force, and I think that's correct in that, it's not only just sort of nice, but necessary to have artistic engagement with these technologies for us to understand them better and for us to find the edge cases with them. So there's that exciting portion of it. I also think it's a very difficult city to be an artist. It's extremely challenging. There are a few reasons for that. One is just housing and prices. But the other is that, like, by and large, the technology industry doesn't really support independent cultural institutions much at all. There are some notable exceptions to that. Of course, it's not nothing, but given the sort of like amount of money flowing through this city, the investment in its cultural infrastructure is almost nothing. So it's in some ways this sort of notion of it being, myopic towards what makes a city livable and to have an actual cultural community is true. And that's true. There are a lot of reasons for that. I think both. There's one thing of process where it's hard to go to companies and like there's no department or mechanism for philanthropy. Usually the way that's done is through market. Sometimes it's marketing money. And also a lot of it's diversity and inclusion money, and we all know what's sort of happening to that as everybody kind of runs to duck their heads from the current administration. So even the mechanisms there were to sort of support cultural activities, companies, by and large, if they want to do something cultural, they'll do it inside the company and do something in New York or London. They won't work with any of the very many small cultural or pick a major institution that's basically to get news or a blog post or something like that, and sort of ignore the real place where emerging artists get supported as they move up the ranks and then become established and then sort of have their own careers that aren't affected by all these forces. So all of that is to say, it's like for all of it, I assume there are a lot of people in this room that are work at companies in various respects or with tech companies, and it all comes down to something very simple. It's like, if you want a cool city to live in, people have to support that goal the same way as you would support other innovation goals that you had in your sort of strategy.
So we touched on a very interesting topic, the artist community, right? Like, burying the trenches, like literally, Gray Area has been almost 17 years in this space. How's the generation has been, like the Gen 1, Gen 2, even before COVID, now to this like, GenAI, the generative artist. Like, what's the evolution like, and what are some of the differences you see there?
It changes all the time. It's like, and for an organization like ours that sort of responds to current events and current technology, and that's sort of like our relevance is our ability to engage with all the current things going on. Of course, in some ways, what the community is focused on is operating at the speed of technology development, and we all know what that's like, right? And part of that is sort of the economic conversation I was having before, is that one of the, in the US, does anybody have an idea of what the National Endowments for the Arts public budget is for the entire nation of the United States? It's $220 million a year for the entire United States of America. And so, given sort of in the US particularly the lack of public, general like underfunding of cultural activities in recent years, the one of artists, and it's sort of why artists are in such a precarious position in terms of the impacts of artificial intelligence, which opens up opportunities, but also like changes the game, right? Which you have to figure out what you're going to do about that. And so a lot of artists have all this by which to say a lot of artists have to try and ride the hype cycles of these technologies because it's the only way they can live. You know, it's very hard to have critical distance now and take a step back. They should have to start running fast enough to keep up with this stuff, because that's how you get some of the, you know, some of this like marketing kind of like money I alluded to earlier. So in that way, the community changes a lot. There's some issues that haven't changed, you know. This period right now, there are a lot more artists thinking about sort of civic engagement, what's going on in the city and how to like do things in public space. And part of the reason for that is just the lack of the public sector's efficacy in sort of solving a lot of the problems that everybody knows that are happening here in San Francisco. And so you see, like, in terms of maker movements and different sorts of digital labs and other sorts of private sector things that are trying to solve big picture social impact issues. Part of the reason for that is because of the complete collapse of any sort of like public coordination around that stuff. And artists are a part of that conversation in a positive way. But that sort of changes, you know, those sorts of community dynamics have been here for years. They've been here pre-COVID. In terms of like post-COVID conversation, audiences, you know, there is sort of a revenue problem here in the sense that audiences have not come back to pre-COVID levels still for most of the venues in the city. It's probably a third down. You know, it's been growing back slowly, but it's, you know, people are coming back to the city and it's getting better, but it's still not what it was in 2019. And the other thing is like corporate events and rentals in terms of a lot of the institutions that rent space around the city. And this is true of major museums and like littler places. There still aren't as many like holiday parties and external events and things like that. So that hasn't really come back the way it was, you know, after the sort of remote office thing, that nobody's got that together again yet. So that's another thing that
If like that. In the city, and I love space. I've always there, like Noise Bridge. I love it. I love the vibe there too. You know, so but I actually want to shine some like more optimistic light to it. We know that there are not so many people like the city, so a lot of the artists become like more kind of visual artists, and they are kind of there's like a whole like virtual world that we can explore. And I know like a lot of the companies also want to work with artists. A lot of the even like world modeling companies, before they have like a business model that works for like robotics or whatever data collection, they willing to experiment it with like artists. And also technologies like blockchain, for instance, right? Even though like we kind of had a hard time with like NFTs and stuff, but there are also like companies still in the space, like especially the gaming, like crypto gaming companies. They had like a new standard, the ERC like 721C, that can protect your rights as your you can set a kind of the minimum price when you do the transaction, right? So you kind of set a minimum price not just for your art, but if you're a game developer, you have a minimum price for your kind of game items in-game items, right? So I kind of like want to add on a more like optimistic note that I think as a community, like especially in SF, like everyone wanted to try to figure this out. And I hopefully with like a good governance, which is like essential to this world, not just us as artists or creatives, but for everyone, will have like a good governance to help us into this like post like AGI or like abundance world. Because like ultimately, if we have like abundant productivity, like with robotics, like nuclear power, whatever, then we can end up in like a safe place. But we need to have a good distribution system or welfare system or whatever, right? To take care of everyone. Then we can create together. But at the moment, like there's so much problem to be solved, and there's so much like that we need to look at.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you're good pointing out that the crypto space has been one of the most supportive of our, that there have been prior to 2020, there was no market for digital art. Even the art institutions mostly ignored it by and large. And so that era that created an entire interest in digital art, even historic, and things that aren't directly NFTs, but that was a great movement. And some of the crypto companies or, blockchain or adjacent are some of the most supported of digital art initiatives. For us, Filecoin does a lot, but there are many more.
One of my portfolio, they haven't launched yet, but basically they are the generation model, but they also kind of incorporate the blockchain technology that everyone can kind of create the music, and also not just that, you can create a virtual idol and you own it. And they also work with other labels and music production companies, the major ones. So everyone kind of doesn't want to create something and not being paid with it, right? So they kind of work with a good incentive model to kind of award people who are creating enriching our life.
And I think the other, there's a lot of great energy in the city right now. I mean, we haven't really talked about AI directly much, but for NFTs and AI, I mean, I think there's an understanding, because both of these sort of technology waves, it turns out that arts and culture were the primary public-facing use cases for all these technologies. That's kind of a new thing. You could argue it a little bit with social media, but it wasn't primarily sort of a creative activity that was the directly public-facing things with sort of NFTs and most of these generative AI tools. And so I think in this city and there's a growing realization that it's vital to have the arts and creative communities engaged in your sort of technology and innovation life cycle. And so I think it is an exciting time where we really have an opportunity now to, if there's San Francisco should be the one city in the world that leads an art and technology conversation. There's no question. And it comes both from what's going on today, but also the realization that the reason that this sort of economic miracle happened here was not that it's kind of nice weather. It's that from a creative community that's been here from 50s and 60s, for 60s, 70s on. And created the conditions where a creative technology industry could thrive. And if we want the sort of next 30 years of that, it's sort of vital that we reinvest into that cultural community that's going to create the next wave of this.
To me, that's something this is a question for you, maybe what does it mean to be a generative artist? How do you create this artist persona? For many people now, they have the tooling with generative media. They want to aspire to artists. What would be the advice you will give it to them?
First of all, I think the definition of artist will change a lot. Previously, what defines the artist is kind of okay. My artwork is being selected, or it's or on some publications. But now I think technology is liberating. Everyone can actually just maybe on their social media, or if they have a lot of views and followers, someone who enjoys and their art, it can be some sort of artist. And was this I created this, use all the AI tools from the audio, but the audio was not playing, but from audio and the visual AI, I made this in 2 days. I believe if I can do it, there is a lot of tutorials online and experiment, right? Everyone could be a part-time artist or create experience that's wonderful. Maybe start from your friends and a larger group. And living in SF, I got a lot of encouragement. Friends who are organizing Gigatech party. Last time they invited me just to showcase my quantum computing art, but I ended up doing the visuals the whole night for the big screens in the club. So like people here is like great. I think you know, if you try it. Like even with like gray area, I had a modular synthesizer class and I started to like mix music. I actually used it for this. So I think
it's one of the reasons the educational component is so important for us. I mean, and this is true, there's never been an easier time to start creating work with all the tools that are available now, you know, generative AI and otherwise, all sorts of software packages. The thing, I mean, the sort of skill of being an artist is to kind of be sensorially attuned to what's going on in the world and be able to respond to it. And there's always going to be what these tools can't do on their own and never, you know, will be able to is create meaning and create context. And that's the place, you know, whatever your art looks like, which could look like images, it could look like video, and it can also look like software, and it can also look like all sorts of prototype, you know, technical prototypes, conceptual things. It really takes an artist to like create the meaning and the context and identify the audience and, you know, learn how to do that stuff. And part of that is like one of the reasons it's really one of the reasons we exist and our educational programs exist is to be that kind of support structure, because it's very difficult as an individual artist these days to there's a lot to do in terms of like brand building, social media profile, communications, learning how to do your bookkeeping and accounting and taxes. And there's a lot of stuff to being an individual artist that's like not fun and nobody talks about very much. And it's like a way I think that we can teach people what's going on. And it's also, you know, if there's a real way that like AI tools can help make creative work possible, it's actually not generating images, it's actually taking care of all of these like everything except the art making stuff that goes into being an artist. If we can help speed up and make all that stuff more efficient, then people can spend their time doing what their skill is, which is being creative. And so this whole thing, and this was I think the page is kind of turning on this a little bit with AI, but for the last 10 years, this whole like you had to be your own brand and you market your stuff, all this stuff, that's kind of an unsustainable thing for one person to do if they don't scale up. You know, there's some ways to deal with that, but I think one of the new ways, you know, that's most exciting about AI is like, okay, like maybe we can clear some of this stuff nobody wants to do about. Yeah.
I agree with this so much. Like since I sold my work as fees, then there are like some inbounds of like commission like some things, and I'm just not good at it. And I wish like someone or some organization of that, and I just wanted to create. I feel so much joy in creating. So, I agree.
Sounds like the agentic workflow is actually perfect for this
Exactly.
The artist tooling. Very interesting. Cool. One last question from me actually. So authenticity, like scarcity, you know, is very important, especially for their like artist work. There has been a lot of criticism about like GenAI tooling or generative media tooling, either like replicable or like portable, creating almost like a too overabundance, right, for the artwork as well. How are you guys thinking about that part? Even to, you know, for you, it's probably how to protect your artists for the gray area program, and for it, probably for you more relevant, you know, even though the work is generated, but maybe there are people trying to copy your style, replicate as well. Like, how you think about that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And kind of a little bit of what I said earlier applies, where it's like there's a difference between content and like really real artwork, you know, and that doesn't, it's not stylistic, and it's not even a good or bad, or it's just like the meaning making and the, you know, and the context and all of that stuff. If you have a real artwork, it locks together and there's a story and there's an artist's personal, you know, all of this stuff happens. That's not to say there are a lot of different types of art, and some have different function, you know, some have social functions. That's not to like degrade like whatever, deviant art or things that, you know, fan art, other things like that. But if you're talking about sort of a capital A kind of like artist working as a career in the contemporary art world, there's a little something different that's going on there. I think that, oh man, I lost the question. We're talking about agentic AI. Authenticity. Yeah, and so the scarcity thing I think is interesting, and this is, you know, you can sort of, it's one of the reasons these paradigms, and you know, the 2000s, there was this open source kind of paradigm around it, and then the NFT thing is a market-based paradigm, and if you brand build, you sort of have a monopoly paradigm. You're trying to build some moats around your practice to protect yourself. I think that yeah, there's going to be a lot of copies and trash and scams. I mean, just like loads of content. I think artists are going to have to find that meaning making in context. So like, that's the special. That's what makes it mean anything. You know, I think we do have to have some sort. You know, the legal, the regulations and everything around this are still moving, but I do think we have to look clearly at the fact that like all of these heavily capitalized companies can only have been built through the benefit of loads of creative labor that happened before them. And so there's some sort of response. I don't know if it's regulatory or if it's just like values-based responsibility to figure out how to support people and, you know, as things change. Yeah, I think that's. I think it's very different. I think this thing of the just like massive content generation is going to be a problem, but I also think that like still very maybe even in the most photorealistic sort of like deep fake world, you can read whether something's interesting. We're still not, you know, maybe you're foolable to a large degree. But not when it comes to very interesting creative work. You know, maybe like, you know, campaign video or something, but like it is really still hard to fake something that truly works. And I think that that's going to be the case, maybe always.
I think a good artist has to be some sort of philosopher. It needs to be has like a message. So why I create art, because I have a message. I want to kind of make people love technology, not to be fearful of technology, help us like kind of merge and ease into this society that will be live with technology, whether we like it or not, with some sort of being augmented, if not have friendships eventually. So this is my message. So I believe like artwork is not just creating the visual audio, but it has to carry some sort of message, or like it has to be some like human touch. Because ultimately, I think all the large language models or anything, it can copy any style, right? It can just create sorts of like different styles. But to me, why I create a lot of like experience, like human experience, because as a human, what advantage I have, I still knows human experience the best, right? I'm still the multi-model, like the natural multi-model being. So this is like one part of the art. And talking about the economics part, like the monetization, I think it will be hard, definitely. Like at the very beginning, like for artists, this is like the problem, I think, not just for artists, but for a lot of the people, like across different industries. And that's why, like, I think as a community, as a whole, we're gonna kind of try to solve it, like through different means, not just like technology, but governance or whatever. So one joke I always like kind of joke about is that I think Singapore probably will be the first that been hit or devastated by this AI wave, because like most of the economy is based on like knowledge economy, like skills economy, right? But Singapore kind of has one of the best like governance systems, right? So I want to see how they cope with it, how they actually kind of organized the society, kind of reoriented everyone and things like that. And we will learn along the way. It's definitely like a challenge to the whole human society, but we will learn and we will improve and
Yeah, you said something about experience there, which I think is important to mention too. And I think there's going to be even more of a refocusing on actual experience. And newsflash, like we don't live on the internet. Sorry. Metaverse is like a hard place to get a good meal still. So it's like, I think doing things in real spaces with people, having experiences together, being in real space, that sort of thing, no matter what the content can be generated or anything, but there's a social and actual element of like being grounded in the world, like having a sensorial experience as a person that's like not going to change. And it's not all just like content online on your phone or whatever. Like that's a very actual small section of what it means to be alive, even though we kind of like, that's where we make all our money. So it's like, want to pretend, but like that part of it's not going to change for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's the wrap for today's conversation. I really like the part, content and art are different. And then we need this philosophical like mind to express your message. I think even for the age of like generative artists, the golden teaching of art is sort of the same, but just different tooling. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, everyone. I think that's a wrap for like our artist panel. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks for sharing, both of you. And I was wondering, in AI art, like, what would you say differentiates a highly skilled artist and someone who is just starting out? I'm wondering, like, if someone has an idea they want to share and they're trying to convey it and like, what makes a highly skilled AI artist? Because I don't know if it's like how you think or the skill that is needed to prompt it or something. Thank you. Yeah, I think first, like, gonna experiment with different prompting. Like, prompting still matters. Like, no matter like what tools like I use, I still like need to refine a lot of my prompts. And also, like, I think pace actually matters because I start to like realize is like the things that you have been kind of accumulated and learned and enhanced with like for the maybe past like decades, it will come to light at some point when you actually kind of make good visuals that can resonate with everyone. And also, if you wanted to do like you kind of need to learn a little bit about transition and the directing. I think that really helps. And other skills is like good sense of humor or just, like kind of knowing like what's going on in the society and resonant with everyone is this is like what I feel it's we live in this like world, we're still in this matrix, we kind of share a lot of experience with everyone. Everyone's like sense of like good art, kind of you will it will shine there. So you will know it's a good art.
Yeah, I think the good news is the things that make a good AI artist make any kind of artist. So I don't think it's any different in that sense. I think there is a particular danger in AI art, which is I don't know if anybody's like hip on Marshall McLuhan, but he talked a lot about how like the electronics, and this was 70s, the electronic system for extensions of man, right? The sensory, like television networks, extensions of our nervous system, things like that. So very early things but the other thing about that is that every extension is an amputation. And so it means like you extend your ears, through these electronic systems. In some way, you're amputating your sensory ability. And the problem, or the potential pitfall, a lot of this AI stuff, is that in a very real way, you're in danger of outsourcing your thinking. And I think, and that means you're sort of amputating your own thinking. And so it's very important, particularly as an artist working with these tools, like you can generate anything, you can collaborate with it, you can use it to help and all this stuff, but it's very important to like, can't outsource your thinking to these things, like Vineyard. And the ones that are good, there are things that have nothing to do with the content or the prompting. They have to do with like, what are you talking about? Like what social commentary are you doing? What thing about society? There's like, why are you doing this? The question of like, why are you doing this thing? It's either interesting or not interesting to an audience larger. And if it is, then you'll have an audience.
So you talked about social commentary. So one of the experiment I did, like I think years ago, in Paris, with that, I think like people's work is a lot of like social commentary and like political commentary. So I was like, okay, so if I pull like with all the like the APIs, so I use like 36, I remember like news APIs and put into the LM, then it will generate some sort of like the significance of that news piece, and I make it into like prompts, and it will like automatically generate like a picture a day. Back then it was like shitty, but now like I did it, like I tried it again like last year. It was actually pretty good. So it's like interesting experiment. It's like use machines or whatever to imitate how humans think, right? So if you have whether you have like authenticity becomes like more and more important in this day and age, right? How deep is the thinking, and so I think it's interesting, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thinking about really